Good day, fellow connoisseurs of cardboard. My name is Brad of Chai Socks Cardboard, and today I want to talk about patience, or as the case may be, my lack of patience. Recently, I've been thinking about a couple of cards that I picked up almost exactly a year ago. It was in January of 2024, right around the time that I got back into the hobby, sort of quote unquote full time, sort of making it part of my daily or at least weekly life. And I was anxious to make some purchases, and I pulled the trigger on a few cards that I kind of now regret for different reasons. And I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about why patience is a virtue in this hobby and how others can avoid some of the same mistakes that I've made. On this channel, I hope you'll find that we talk as much about lessons learned as about victories or successes, and so that the folks out there can learn a little bit vicariously from my experience, from the experience of other folks that I'll talk to in the future, both the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so this episode is more about the bad and the ugly, some mistakes that I've made, and hopefully that you can take those lessons learned and turn them into opportunities to avoid similar mistakes in your own collecting habits. So the first one I want to cover is a purchase that I made I double checked the date. I made this purchase on January 13th, so 364 days ago, or no, because 2024 was a leap year, 365 days ago today, I made this purchase. An Adrian Beltre, 1997 Bowman Chrome rookie card. Now, why is the exact date important? Well, you may recall that Adrian Beltre was elected as a first ballot Hall of Famer in late January 2024 to the Hall of Fame, and then he was inducted this past summer. And so January 13th, 2024 was just a week or two prior to the vote being released. I think the writers voted well in advance of that, but the vote was released in late January, and so in mid-January, Adrian Beltre was known to be probably a first ballot Hall of Famer, and so I was interested in picking up a card of his. What I did not do in picking up that card was any research at all as to whether that was a good time or a bad time to pick up a card of someone like Adrian Beltre. And so the fact of the matter was he was very likely to be elected as a first ballot Hall of Famer. And this was roughly 2 weeks or so before that vote was going to get announced. So what would have made sense is to double check what other Hall of Fame cards had done under similar circumstances. I did not do that. But in hindsight, I've gone back and recreated the research that I could have done at the time in order to avoid making what I have now concluded is not the wisest purchase. And so I'll bring you in on some of that research. The first is a 1993 SP 279 Derek Jeter foil rookie card. And this is really his most iconic rookie card, the one that is most valuable. And so he was a 2020 on the 2020 Hall of Fame ballot. He was certainly, even more than Adrian Beltre, a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. So let's just pick a mid to high grade version of this and go back to the 2020 time frame. Around this period, his card was selling for, this would have been in the month leading up to his selection, this card was going for anywhere between $300 and $400 on average. If we fast forward a little bit to after his selection, it's gone down more like 300 to 350, dipping below 300 at times, and finding its way above 300 a little bit. Then the pandemic spike, and now as we move forward into the more like 2023 timeframe, this card is more like an average of 200, and now even closer to the present, more like 100. You can see the current VCP average on this card is just $109. So that tells me that in the year or so following his selection to the Hall of Fame, his card value went down as compared to immediately preceding and immediately after his selection. But you might say Derek Jeter is kind of an unusual example. Plus, that occurred prior to the pandemic spike. So I also went and looked at David Ortiz, who was also a first ballot Hall of Famer. I would say maybe not as much of a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer, certainly as Derek Jeter, maybe not quite even as much as Adrian Beltre. But he indeed was selected on the first ballot, and he seemed like the best example from the previous few years of somebody who was most likely to be selected on the first ballot. And so he was selected in 2022, and this card is his 1998 Bowman Chrome card, so kind of comparable to the 1997 Beltre Bowman Chrome. And we can see that if we go back to the 2022 time frame, in December of 2022, you start to see a spike in this card up to the, above $50, multiple examples at around 50 or higher. And then in the months following his selection, it falls to something like more of an average of 25-ish dollars moving forward. And then to the present, you can see that the current VCP average here is only $17. And that would seem like a pretty good comparison to the Adrian Beltre card that I picked up. So had I done this research in advance of buying the Adrian Beltre rookie, I might have decided to wait 6, 8 months, maybe even 12 months before making that purchase. So, with the benefit of 2020 hindsight, let's see what happened with Adrian Beltre's rookie. Here is the exact same card that I have right here. And if we scroll down and look at the early, so this is current. But if we look at the late 2023, early 2024 time period, we can see that this card was going for around $100, give or take. We got 115, 62, 90, 97, 80, 100, 98, 100, 100, 98, 114. And this is my card, this $80 purchase, which seemed like a decent purchase at the time because it was coming on the heels of consistent $100 or more sales. So at $80 on January 13th, 2024, I purchased this card, and I felt good about that at the time. Now, the case is a little bit scratched, which I think might have been one of the reasons that I got it at less than $100, which is just what it had been going for consistently at the time. But so I felt good about that. I intended to keep the card long term, so I wasn't too bothered by a scratched case. The card itself looked great. I was happy overall with the purchase. However, as we move forward in time, you can see that the price just went down. So here's my $80 purchase. It stuck around 80, 90, touched right at 100 again, and then it just sort of gradually went down as the months went by. And if we move forward all the way to the present, you can see that it's going for more like in the mid 40s, and that's even consistently down in the 30s for a while. it's touched 50 for a little bit, and when you add it all up, the VCP average is at 42.25. So that is just 1 year after Adrian Beltre's selection to the Hall of Fame, and about 6-7 months since he was inducted. So the lesson learned there is, had I done some research, I might have held off on purchasing that card. I might have been able to get it, instead of for $80, for more like $40. Could have had the same card for half the price and had $40 more in my pocket to spend on something else. In the end, not a great purchase, but I wanted an Adrian Beltre card around the time that he was being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and I have it, and I'll plan to keep it long term. I like it. I remember collecting Bowman Chrome in the late 90s, and so this was a card that kind of spoke to me for his selection. I remember watching Adrian Beltre when he was playing early in his career. So I'm happy with the card. That part is not a regret. I'm happy that I purchased it. The part that I regret is purchasing it when I did, at the price point I did, when research available to me at the time should have been done and would have told me that if I waited 6 or 8 or 12 months, I'd be able to pick it up at a better price at a later date. All right, so that's one lesson learned, one purchase that I don't love with hindsight. The next one is a back to vintage, and it is Luis Alvarado. 1973, Luis Alvarado. And I purchased this card raw also about a year ago in January 2024. I got it for, it wasn't super expensive by any stretch. Luis Alvarado, not exactly a household name, definitely a common card in this set. A little bit of a unique card in this set, though, and I actually got to thinking about it because it was featured on Instagram with vintage card fun facts recently. This was just a few days ago, I believe, that this post was made, and it's a unique card. It's a unique card because there's the cars in the background. It's clearly not at a major league ballpark, so I did a little bit of digging, as well as the folks on here did a little bit of digging that helped me arrive at the likely explanation for this photograph. And it looks like it was probably Payne Park in Sarasota, which was the spring training complex for the White Sox for about, it was like 20 or 30 years, up until like the 1990s. They did spring training in Sarasota. And just because I was interested, I did a little bit more digging and found this photograph, which I think, if we look at the card and the photograph, the card looks like it's being shot from like the first base dugout. That's Luis Alvarado there covering second base. And if we look here, you can see that if the photograph was taken from around here, pointed this way, I think it's these cars, this parking lot on the other side of the left field fence that we're seeing in this shot. So for one thing, I found the card just extremely interesting. I was interested in buying it. I was making a purchase from the seller. It was off eBay. The seller had it listed for a few dollars, said it was in near mint condition, and I was interested in the card, and I just purchased it on a whim. Only a few dollars. I think it was actually $8 that I purchased it for. Which, if I looked at comps on eBay, and I did right before now, $8 is certainly on the high end. But it's not an exorbitant card to begin with. So it wasn't the dollar figure that had me that ultimately had me regretting this purchase. The reason I regret this purchase is that when I got the card, it's well centered. Let me get the best angle on it here. It's well centered. The corners and the edges look good. But what you can't quite tell, and especially for someone who is not as read into the 1973 set as I was not, certainly at the time, and still really am not particularly, don't have a particular expertise in the set. What you can't quite tell is that it's discolored. Looks like, I mean, I don't know why it's discolored. Maybe it was in a smoker's house for some number of years, or maybe it was exposed to the sun a little bit too much, or who knows. It's not the point, obviously, why it's discolored, but it's just a little bit off-white. And I started to realize this as I started looking at more and more 1973 cards, to include this one that I ultimately purchased about 9 months later, having really enjoyed the card but not being real pleased with my version. I purchased this one at a really great price later. And so just to demonstrate how good of a price it was, I've got it up here on VCP. So that was a PSA 9 version. Here is the history of PSA 9 sales. And if we go back to November of 2020, it has sold about 10 times since November 2020. Or this is actually September 2020, $84, $59, $100, $115, $120, $140, $100, $76. And here's my purchase at $34.09. So in the past 5 years, and then there's one after that at $88.80. So in the past 5 years or so, little less than 5 years, I've gotten this at way at the lowest price, kind of by far, in a PSA 9. And it, you know, if you're not familiar with my channel, my primary focus is collecting White Sox cards. The White Sox don't have many Hall of Famers, and certainly not a lot of high-priced Hall of Famers. And so a lot of what I collect are common cards, so I can afford them in decent grades. And for 1973, definitely I would be looking for a PSA 8 or a PSA 9. And what I should have done back in January of 2024 is seen a card that I'm really interested in, set it on my watch list for eBay, and then waited until it came up in the right version, one that I knew I was going to be happy with, as opposed to making the impulse buy, even if it was just for $8. If I had learned both of the lessons that I've discussed here today, I'd have about $48 more in my pocket to buy more White Sox cards that I really enjoy, and I wouldn't have a Luis Alvarado raw that would be very difficult to get even $8 out of this that I put in. So those are my lessons learned, and the primary lesson being that patience is a virtue. If you see a card you like that is not rare, and certainly neither of these cards are rare, even in pretty high grade in PSA 8 or PSA 9, the Alvarado is not rare. Don't just buy the one that is in front of you at any given time. Wait until you find the right version for your collection. Now, ultimately, for these two cards, I have the right version in my collection. The problem is, I've also got one that is not the right version, the raw Alvarado, and I paid about twice as much as I needed to pay for the Beltray. So, what are some examples of patience being a virtue or not a virtue, impatience and not being a virtue in your collection? I'd like to hear from you. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for watching. And as always, collect what you love, flip what you like.